This entry is really just my story from start to finish. Yeah, it's a lot. When I actually even think about the beginnings up until now, it's crazy. It's emotional, but yeah, here's introducing the next diary entry. I'm gonna now talk through my endometriosis journey from the beginning up until now. So, gosh, where to start? My symptoms started from the first period. So from my very first period, my symptoms were diabolical. The pain I was experiencing was so extreme. I said to my mum at the time, I think I need to go to hospital. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was just extremely painful. I couldn't sit, I couldn't stand. I was sort of rolling around. This pain was just permeating through my lower abdomen, my uterus, my ovaries, my lower back, my legs. It was just so painful that I was like, there's no way this is a period. I know I'm to expect like some cramps and some discomfort, but this was like shocking pain, which was followed by profuse throwing up, vomiting, and just in hell, just having to like try and get through it, lay up in bed, trying hot water bottles. I remember this far back, but it was so palpable, that memory. Even a hot water bottle wasn't helping. It was making me feel more nauseous. The heat was just making my whole body overheat and I was just throwing up. So yeah, that was the beginning. I always say this line, that was the beginning of the rest of my life, which sounds so crazy. But yeah, that first period marked the beginning of what was to become my normal monthly periods. So every month for like 3 to 5 days I would suffer like that. Never a month did I get a break. Never was there a month where it was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And it was really difficult when I was younger, because I remember like I couldn't, I don't think I understood what tracking my cycle was necessarily back then. So you just kind of anticipating this dreadous time of the month, and it would hit at the most inconvenient times, of course. Being out with friends, being out with family, being at school meant I was always sent home, because as soon as I felt that pain, I would obviously try and persevere, but I'd end up throwing up, passing out, going to the school nurse. She'd give me a herbal tea, I'd throw it all up, and then it just became a thing where I always got sent home if I happened to be in school when my period hit. So I dealt with that from the age of 13 for my whole teenage years in school and education. And then it was one day I was commuting to work. I was 19 at this age, and I was hit with an incredibly bad flare-up of pain, and I just blacked out on a train going home, passed out. And it was after that when I went to the GP, I was put on the pill. They were like, right, we know you've been having these painful periods, we'll stick you on the pill. And I think the pill kind of did a good job at masking things for a little while. The pain didn't disappear. It did kind of alleviate slightly for a while. Yeah, I don't know. I just found like it was slightly easier to deal with the periods. Again, I'd been dealing with them for like so many years. It's hard to tell if it was just my body climatizing to what was abnormally normal for me, but it felt like it did kind of just reduce the pain slightly and help to mask it a little bit. So I'd had scans, I'd had ultrasounds, I'd had internal scans, like what they call transvaginal scans, and all they'd ever find were fibroids, and small cysts on the ovaries that they weren't concerned about. And I did used to get told a lot of the time that, like, you know, it's quite common with Black heritage, Afro-Caribbean heritage, to deal with fibroids. It's kind of can come with the territory. So it kind of felt like, you know, you've culturally inherited this misfortune by default. So therefore, it didn't seem like there was much action or initiation to investigate things further. So I was always kind of aware of, oh, okay, I have fibroids. Maybe that's part of why I'm in this pain. So anyway, years later, throughout that period of being on the pill, I was still going to the GP complaining about pain and symptoms, severe bloating, severe pelvic pain, lower back pain, the nausea continued and the throwing up continued. And then I'd say, you know, after about 10 years of being on the pill, that's when I was kind of like, it felt like I'd gotten reversed completely back to the intensity of how bad the pain was previously. And I was sent to have a laparoscopy because obviously it'd been all these years and I'd never had any keyhole surgery to look at anything. Anyway, that surgery didn't find anything. Granted, they just had a look around, didn't take any biopsies, didn't sample any tissue, and the surgery was done by a general gynecologist, not an endometriosis specialist. I remember feeling really devastated after that surgery. I hadn't met with a consultant, I just met with members of their team. And then on the day of the surgery, I got a glimpse of the consultant and I kind of just tried to quickly summarize like my life's journey with this pain and how desperate I was to get answers. And I said, you know, obviously I would really appreciate if this can be like as thoroughly investigated as possible because yeah, I've had years of this and I really need to get answers. And I remember feeling like they were very much like, yeah, you know, like I didn't feel heard or reassured. I just felt like I was just hoping and praying that the surgery would go well and they'd find out what was wrong with me. And then afterwards, it was literally a case of we didn't see anything. It looked okay. I had some complications with that surgery because my wounds weren't sealed very well and I ended up developing keloids on my belly button, which later ended up needing to be removed via a debulking surgery. And I then went on to have steroid injections in my wound sites up until this day. So I've been having steroid injections for years. I am prone to keloids. So anyway, after that, I dealt with a really difficult time. Like I felt completely disillusioned. I was like, how can there be nothing wrong with me? Like the pain is excruciating. Like it hits you to the bone. You know, it was just such a palpable, dreadful pain that I had to dread this period every month and be in agony. And not to mention all the premenstrual symptoms that came with it, the bloating, the nausea, the exhaustion, the body aches, just the normal irritability and normal PMS that you would experience. But it was so heightened, and just having to prep for that anxiety of like not knowing when it was going to hit. Eventually I did obviously track my periods, and I had really regular periods, so I kind of always knew when they were coming. I had to, it was part of planning around life. But yeah, I just remember feeling really devastated and helpless and hopeless and like, wow, so is it just the fibroids that's causing me such debilitating pain? And then yeah, I was kind of a bit lost after that. I was investigated for some bowel things. They concluded that I had IBS. And I was told at one point that I had PMDD as well. So I was kind of taking medication to try and manage that. Wasn't helping. The bowel symptoms were so bad, like I couldn't do up my trousers at the best of times. I would just bloat. So I'd wake up, stomach flat, iron board flat. Within an hour, I look 6 months pregnant. And without having eaten something to necessarily trigger it or drank anything, it would just happen whenever it wanted to. Food triggers were a component in just kind of affecting the bloating overall, but this used to just happen all the time. Anyway, a few years later, I ended up back with concerns. Obviously, the pain hadn't changed or improved. By this point, the pain was becoming more frequent. It was becoming like every other day rather than just like during that period of a month. It was happening like weekly. And I was noticing changes with like my bleed. So I ended up having another scan, and this time they found polycystic ovaries. So I was sent to a specialist. Lo and behold, that specialist assessed me and was convinced that I had endometriosis. And I was like, oh no, I don't have it. I've been investigated for it. I don't. And this specialist said to me, well, no, I think you do. They did an internal examination on me and said they could feel scar tissue upon internal exam, and sent me for an MRI, which then went on to confirm deep infiltrating endo. It was in the area between like my womb and bowel, and I had endometriomas on the ovaries as well. And obviously the fibroids. So I was quite shocked, somewhat relieved, somewhat felt really validated, because by this time it had been 20 plus years of the symptoms and no answers and dismissal and no real thorough investigations, because even with the first laparoscopy there was no biopsies taken. So I was like, wow, okay. You know, it was such a strange feeling, because I think at the time that I knew I was going for the MRI, I already had it in my head that the specialist was quite certain they could feel scarring, which was a sign. There were adhesions. But yeah, when the MRI came back with it, I was like, oh, wow. So yeah, I ended up having a second surgery. I had some endometriosis excised. It was affecting my bladder and bowel more prominently, but the pain by this point, after I'd waited on the wait list for surgery and undergone lots of hormonal treatments, different pills, I had the surgery and was hoping and praying for some improvement after all these years of suffering so badly. It was at the point where it was affecting my mobility and being able to work and live a normal life. Like I just was, there were days I'd wake up and I couldn't do anything because I was in so much pain, getting these mega flare-ups outside of my menstrual cycle. I was used to getting them around the lead up to the period, during the period and after. Now it was happening any random moment, like debilitating flare-ups that were like taking me out, passing out in public, severe bladder and bowel symptoms as well that were just affecting being able to use your bladder and bowel in the normal way, retention issues, spasms, pain, bleeding outside of the period. Following the surgery, I was like thinking hopefully things would improve, and to my absolute horror, things worsened. They became 10 times worse, and I didn't think it was possible for things to get worse, but they were so bad. Like they had worsened horrifically. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? Like, I knew I'd had excision done. I thought that the area that had been revealed on the MRI had been dealt with. I kept going back to my specialist consultant, explaining that I was in so much pain. After surgery, I was in like diabolical daily pain for about 3 months. I'd had a Mirena inserted, which took a while to settle. I don't think it ever really properly settled, but I was in extreme pain from the Mirena because I suffer with keloids. So I mentioned that earlier because I've been told that because of the way I scar externally with keloids. So keloids are like when the skin tries to overheal itself and too much collagen is produced and it produces like a lumpy scar. So where I'd had 3 excisions made, they start to keloid, they overheal. The same thing was likely happening internally, which would point to why there were so many adhesions and scar tissue, along with the endo, along with the inflammation. They also discovered during that surgery that not only did I have deep endometriosis, but I also had adenomyosis, which was diffuse throughout the uterus. So it would explain, it would explain further why I was in so much pain. Not only did I have endometriosis, I also had diffuse adenomyosis and fibroids. So a lot going on. They'd also picked up some gallstones on that first MRI. Important to mention that because that trickles into what's happening currently with me. But this was all during 2022. I was really struggling. I had to come out of full-time work. I was no longer able to do the things I used to do, like dance or be mobile, so yeah, very difficult. Bladder symptoms exacerbated terribly. So I would have bladder retention issues where I basically would be bursting to wee, couldn't wee. It would be so painful. I was constantly on like UTI type medication, but never had a UTI infection. So it was just like, it felt mechanical. It was like my bladder was just spasming, wouldn't allow me to like urinate properly. It would cause severe bloating, burning, discomfort, like trickles coming out and then nothing. And then there'd be times where I'd be absolutely bursting to go wee out of nowhere, couldn't hold it, like really sporadic, awful experiences with my bladder. I'd been referred to see a bladder specialist, like a urinary bladder specialist 3 times. Up to now, I never managed to get that appointment. I'll come back to that later. Bowel symptoms had exacerbated, just horrific symptoms. Where the endo sits, it's in between that very delicate area in the septum. So horrible symptoms that were just debilitating. They were daily. It was no longer just like, premenstrual period, ovulation, like it was every day. It is every day. I say was as if it was in past tense. This is how things are, unfortunately, up until this very moment. So yeah, horrendous. I eventually had a 3rd surgery. I fought really hard for this surgery because my specialist didn't think that the endometriosis had grown back, and I was like, I don't know what's happened, but my pain is, I can't live like this. Like, I was on different medications. I'd tried things like Ryoco, Diagestinol, I think it's called, the progesterone medication. I was on the Marina coil. I tried every pill going and nothing was helping me. I was on the strongest of pain meds by this point. I'd already exhausted cocodamol, codeine. By this point, I'm on tramadol daily, naproxen, other medications to control the bowel symptoms and bloating symptoms and the acid reflux I was dealing with. I'd had another MRI that had shown that the endometriosis that was there prior to surgery was still there, which set alarm bells because I naturally thought my endometriosis had grown back really quickly. Went through this back and forth with a period of not really understanding what that was all about, but had been reassured by my specialist that it was likely just some scarring, and I do have adenomyosis, so that's probably a strong indicator of what's causing the pain. I have diffuse adenomyosis, which means it's all throughout the womb, which means it's, adding a lot of pressure and bulk to the womb, causing it to lean on other organs, causing it the womb to lean on the bladder, which is then compressing and affecting the bowel, and all these reasons as to why, surgery was probably not going to do anything. I then wanted to have another MRI to find out like what was going on, because I just couldn't get my head around the fact that this endometriosis that had been there from before my surgery, like in 2020, why it was still there in 2023. Had a lot of pushback regarding that. Had an ultrasound instead, which just showed the same thing ultrasounds always show with me, which are cysts on the ovaries, fibroids, nothing much else. Never has my deep endo been detected on an ultrasound in the 20 plus years I've had these issues. So again, really would have preferred an MRI to confirm things. Eventually got one, had to fight tooth and nail to get it. And the 3rd MRI confirmed exactly what I believed was the case, which was that I still had deep endo in the RVS septum. It's a technical term, but basically the exact same deposit that was there in 2020, 2023 was still there in 2025. And it was hemorrhagic, so it was an active lesion. My fibroids had grown bigger. By this point, I'd gone from having 1 or 2 tiny gallstones to having 7 large gallstones, which meant I would have to have gallbladder removal. There is some research to suggest that there could likely be a link between the two. Growing up with those extreme period pains, vomiting profusely every period, you know, sometimes I'm taking things like NSAIDs or ibuprofen, or those times I would take mefenamic acid, and a lot of the time couldn't keep down food because I'm constantly throwing up. And I do think that there was a long-term effect of the NSAIDs, the ibuprofen completely tearing apart my tummy and my body's ability to maybe break down acid and bile. I don't know, but I just know that, yeah, other symptoms had developed, other issues had developed along with the endo, adenomyosis and all these pain problems. So that kind of leads to where we are now. Yeah, so after that MRI, I was actually then granted surgery. I was told before that I could go on a wait list, but I was waiting for a long time. After that third MRI confirmed an active hemorrhagic deposit of endo in the same place, over the span of 5 years, I was told I would have surgery to remove that deep endo lesion and anything else that was found. I also had an internal exam which tested point pressure, and it could be felt when the consultant pressed on a particular area and asked me if there was pain there. I said it was debilitating. It felt like I'd been shot in the uterus when they palpated that area. So there was a plan. I was going to have this surgery and have it removed. I was going to also have some more investigations with the bowel, sigmoidoscopy, have tubes flushed, and just check that everything's okay with the ovaries and that, because I was constantly getting these chocolate cysts on the ovaries that would come and go. But lo and behold, I had that surgery in 2025 in the summer, and it was an unsuccessful surgery. It was what's been deemed a failed surgery because they didn't remove the endometriosis during this surgery. And unfortunately, it was a failed surgery because they were, for some reason, unable to remove the deep lesion of endometriosis. I think sometimes with deep endo, when it's deep within the tissue and not glaringly visible upon a quick look around, decisions are made as to whether to dissect the area and excise the disease. And in my case, it wasn't. I don't know what else to say about it, but I came out of surgery with a really rough recovery, but the actual endo that was supposed to be removed wasn't. And I was also told that it was likely that I had focal adenomyosis during that surgery. So my journey to date has been having been told lots of conflicting things. Might I mention that before my second surgery, I did ask if it was possible that I might have adenomyosis, and I was told absolutely not. Scans would pick that up. It's got quite an obvious indication on imaging, and you don't have adenomyosis. So my suspicions were dismissed. However, after that second surgery, I was told, actually, you do have adenomyosis and it's diffuse, which means it's all throughout. I was then questioning after that surgery what was going on. Like, had my endo reoccurred? It hadn't reoccurred. It hadn't reappeared. It hadn't been excised. So the second surgery only dealt with some of my endo, peritoneal lesions, surface layer lesions of endometriosis from the uterosacral ligaments and the anterior board ligaments. These are all technical terms, but I've obviously had to do my research and understand what is going on within my body, because a lot of the times when I talk to specialists, I find I'm given a really kind of dumbed down summary version, which leaves out a lot of really important detail. So in summary, 3 surgeries later, I still have, so in summary, 3 surgeries later, I'm still in debilitating, widespread daily pain. My endometriosis, my deep endo, my DIE, deep infiltrating endometriosis, has not been removed. I had excision in 2022, but it was of peritoneal surface level endo. I'm still dealing with diffuse adenomyosis, fibroids that have grown in size, so multiple fibroids, and nothing nothing has helped me thus far. Nothing has led to any improvement. I mentioned being on the Mirena coil. It was a very difficult adjustment because it was so painful when it was first inserted, and it continues to still spasm and cause sort of sharp pain ongoingly. But the one pro with the Mirena is that it lightens the bleeding, so it doesn't help with the pain, but it does lighten the bleed. So I have the Mirena ongoingly, and I'm just dealing with extreme pain and no solutions. And I think knowing that the endo is still in my body after waiting a very long time to get this removed, essentially I have a lesion that's been there since 2020 and before, that's still untreated, is quite concerning for me. It's worrying. You know, I know I'm on, I don't really know. I'm on hormones that are supposed to try and help control things, but nothing I'm taking, from painkillers to hormones to the 3 surgeries I've undergone, have helped with my chronic debilitating pain that's had such a huge impact on my day-to-day life, on my future, on everything, on my ability to do anything. It's been a humongous impact. It's been difficult being told conflicting things from different healthcare providers. The fact is, a lot of the time, no one has the answers. So they're just kind of deliberating and guessing, and the guesses a lot of the time are wrong. I'm currently trying to get transferred to a new care team, which has been really difficult. So for the last 7 months, I've not been under a proper care team, which has been really difficult. I'm basically trying to manage on my own. It's really difficult. I think, you know, it's been a lot of grieving the life I once had. Nowadays, I'm very isolated. I do have a fear of going out and about and doing things because it's so unpredictable to know when the pain flares are going to hit. The pain's always there, but the flares are taking the pain from like a 5 to a 10, and it can happen just like that. And it's really isolating and difficult just not being able to live normal life. Being out anywhere at any given time, pain could hit so diabolically that I can't be around people. It's something I have to deal with internally when I'm at home in the comfort of my own space, and it has caused a lot of isolation and having to just turn down a lot of social engagements. I'm not very social these days. I spend a lot of time at home just dealing with things in my own space because it's where I feel most safe. So it's been a huge adjustment, and it continues to be something I have to navigate day to day, and I only hope that things can improve one day, but at the moment things are at a bit of a standstill and life goes on, so we just got to keep it moving basically. Yeah.